We'll start in about a minute. If everybody can finalize their coffee cups, have a seat. We'll get going in just a moment. Thanks. Good? Good. Let's find out. You Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Hope you had a restful evening. Trust everybody enjoyed their dinner last night. Good. Good, good. Okay, well, we have a full program today, but we're going to end sharp at 2:30, I promise. Still have the hook if we need it, and haven't had to use it. I really appreciate all the speakers, the panelists, and so on yesterday, totally staying on time. I also appreciate that we have an external audience, so for those of you that we haven't welcomed properly, I'm sorry we haven't actually, because we're being live streamed into a lot of places. And we had wonderful messages yesterday from inside the province and from well outside the province. So we're not alone as we capture this content and it's live streamed. It's also important to remind you that nothing is getting missed in our dialogues and our discussions. Karen Palmer and Kimberly are here working on capturing that content. And as I said to you yesterday, we'll have a very nice proceedings that flow from these 2 days, written hopefully in a fashion that will be actionable. And of value to you. And it'll probably take us about 30 days before we post that on the website, but for sure it'll be available to you. And please remember that any of the slides, of course, that you see over the course of the 2 days as well, we'll post those on the website. And here's how we're contacted by hashtag. And I love our Wi-Fi password, and glad that we're using that. There's a few things that we ought to do before we start today. Just to help get us started. So if any of the following people are in the room, can I ask you to just stand up? And I know that we don't have all that many of those folks here, but like, let's start here. Fraser Bell, Amy Doyle, Shannon Freeman, Ray Markham, Tamara Reichert, Tammy Rogers, Rita Weeb, Ryan Dernbach, Carol Barry, Aaron Bond, Perry Kim, John Muscaderi, Jeff Payne, and Rachel Wells. Wow. I must have deliberately decided to keep them away. That was your planning. Oh, you didn't stand up, Rita. That was your planning committee. Please join me in thanking them. Now, very relevantly, our main partner in all of this has been the Canadian Frailty Network. That's pretty apparent, and we really do thank, on behalf of Russell Williams, the chairman of our board, really grateful that you participated in this. But we have many other partners, and I just want to cite them now, if I might. And one way or another, they've had input to the program, or they've helped us in some way. or being on the planning committee and what have you. So for sure, let me please comment on this list of partner organizations: Northern Health, First Nations Health Authority, University of Northern British Columbia, the Canadian Frailty Network, Rural Coordination Centre for BC, and the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. Please join me in thanking our sponsors. As we said earlier, we are being live streamed. If you have concerns or sensitivities about being photographed, please let us know. We won't do that, but you know, you've been in the media over the last 24 hours. Let's perhaps get started like we started yesterday, and could we invite Elder Darlene to join us again today. Darlene, thank you so much for being with us, and we really appreciate your words. Please stand.
Well, thank you for that. Usually I have to ask you to stand, so this is nice. Hadi.
Hey.
Holy. Hola. That's great. Good crowd this morning. How nice, considering the miserable day. I shouldn't say miserable day. I guess we need the rain on Mother Earth. So, as we've always started, take that nice deep cleansing breath throughout your whole body. Feel yourself grounding to beautiful Mother Earth, remembering that she sustains your life here on the earth plane, and she gives you everything you need. Not only does she do that, she gives you all the energy you need for today. So this we are grateful for. So if we can bow our heads, please. We ask the Creator, the grandfathers and grandmothers, to be with us today. Thank you for this beautiful day on Mother Earth. Thank you for the gift of community. Thank you for bringing all who are present, ready and willing to work towards building a strong relationship with each other. And, most important, willing to make a powerful commitment to the caring of our older adults. With this commitment, we walk the good red road in promoting and acknowledging our unique differences in how we learn. Creator, we come together in gratitude and understanding the ways of learning and helping our beloved senior citizens. The support needed, whatever that may be. Let us all come together as one, bringing the best of who we are into the world. Mother Earth, as we stand on you softly, connecting with your heartbeat, thank you for continuing to support us, allowing your essence to vibrate through us, interconnecting with all that lives in and on your body. Creator, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for leading us gently on our journey back to you. Let us be guided by your light. All my relations must see. Thank you. Please be seated.
So we really have a treat this morning. Schedule got changed for our mayor of Prince George, and he's with us, Lynn Hall. Two-term mayor in this wonderful town, and Mayor Hall, I have to say that we really have felt welcomed here. We love your center. It's been very welcoming, and the proximity of the hotels make it nice to get around, and we've generally enjoyed your city. We'd enjoy if you might bring us a few remarks, please. Mayor Lynn Hall. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Tom. And I have the I was going to say the option, Darlene. I guess I do have the option but I have the privilege of following Darlene at many events, and she really does ground me. Her comments I take to heart every time we're together. So Darlene, thank you very much. And welcome and good morning, everyone, to the symposium, but also to Prince George. And thank you, Tom, for those kind remarks about our city. We're very, very proud of it. And for those of you who don't live here, if you're considering moving to Prince George, I've got a little kiosk out in the front entrance there. I'd be more than pleased to give you some information. I also want to welcome you and recognize that we're on the traditional territory of the Clayton today, which is an important partnership with Chief Poutney and his council. You know, symposiums like this are so important for our community, and it's an important piece of work for municipalities across the province and certainly across the country. Prince George, like many communities, are seeing an increase in older adult populations, and with this increase, it's important that we understand the needs of those folks. And I think in many respects, the learning curve has been steep for us as a municipality, and we've, I think, made some big strides in the last number of years, but there is certainly bigger strides to make. Because of our geographic location in the largest city in central and northern BC, we really are a hub for a number of services that take place here in the province. Services such as healthcare to housing, and I'm going to just touch on housing in a moment. And, you know, it's about the partners that we have, and it's about providing the services, but it's about understanding what those partners need. And I think it's symposiums like this where we have local people who participate in the symposium that can provide us with that guidance. Because as a city, a municipality, corporately, there's a number of responsibilities that we have, and we look to partners to be able to guide us through that. There is a group in town, and it's interesting because Charles Jago and I were talking about the group just for a minute or two, and that's the Aging in Place group. Rita's here, and she is a force to be reckoned with in our city when it comes to older adults, and she warned me about using certain names here today. And Rita, I want to thank you. You've opened up the eyes of many of our folks in the community, particularly those of us who have an opportunity to do something. And I'm glad that you're a force to be reckoned with. We need more people like you to champion really the issues that we're seeing and trying to help older adults and people that are in need. So thank you. Aging with attitude. What did I say? Oh, aging with attitude. I think your first conversation with me was about aging in place, so when we were talking about housing, I think. Yeah. So, you know, one of the issues that I wanted to take on when I first became mayor was housing. We recognize the need for housing, but also the support services within those housing locations. We had a number of older adults that were looking at moving away from Prince George, which was not an option for me. It was important for me to make sure that we had an option for them to stay in our city, and they were very clear to me that the option was housing at various levels of housing, whether it be market housing, subsidized housing. That was their want. Their want as well was, can we provide services? Can we take a look at partnering with organizations to provide in-house service and care? So I think we've gotten partway down that journey of fulfilling some of that need, but there's still greater need for it today. For me, there's really a need, as I've said, for strong partnerships within our community to maybe, to be able to fulfill some of the things or all of the things that you're talking about at the symposium. And there isn't a municipality that I don't deal with and have a relationship with through the mayor and councils that aren't tackling or struggling with the issue of older adults in the community and how we can provide for them. So I'm grateful that this symposium is taking place here today. And I just want to make one last comment about our social planning department, which is a department that has really flourished over the last few years and has taken on a larger role in ensuring that we meet the needs of older adults throughout the city. But with that also comes a challenge that we're having to meet those needs of people who are coming to Prince George because they're in smaller outlying communities that don't provide those services. And our city has the capacity. And quite honestly, if we don't have the capacity in a certain area, we have to build that capacity to make that service work. So thank you very much for being here. It's greatly appreciated, and I hope the rest of your stay you enjoy. And this is typical weather for Prince George on November 8th. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Wonderful. One other introduction, if I might, before we start into the main part of our programming today. We have the benefit of being in Northern Health, and we've had lots of interactions with Northern Health, and I really want to thank Fraser, particularly, and Aaron in their input for the program for this 2 days. What we really would hope to do after this conference is have something that is left behind and that we can pick up again. This shouldn't be a one-shot deal. This should be a longitudinal arrangement and relationship, not cross-sectional. What should we do next? What should happen next for BCHSN and rural remote BC, and specifically for Northern Health? So we're really delighted today that the chair of the board for Northern Health used to be Charles. And now we're delighted it's Colleen Nice, board chair for Northern Health, and we'd appreciate a few words. Colleen, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Hadi.
Hadi.
It's my great pleasure to be here this morning, and indeed yesterday as well, enjoying this conference. I bring you greetings from Northern Health and from the Northern Health Board of Directors in particular. I too would like to acknowledge with respect that we are meeting and holding this conference on the traditional tribal territory of the Lheidli T'enneh people. I'd also like to begin by thanking, as we heard Tom do earlier, the partners. Yesterday, I heard many comments about the necessity for the North not to be forgotten in this province, and our voices need to be heard. And that came through loud and clear to me. So the partners bringing this conference here to the North is actually a big deal. So I would really like to thank as well the Canadian Frailty Network, the Academic Health Sciences Network, Rural Coordination Centre of BC, UNBC, First Nations Health Authority, and Northern Health. Thank you very much. Kudos to you for doing this. The topics we are discussing over these 2 days are timely and extremely important to all of us at Northern Health. And we heard many times yesterday that the population of people over age 65 is our fastest growing demographic. Now, population growth in this age group is a new experience, really, for us in the North. Generally, it's always been that people would work here, retire, and then move to the South. But not so much anymore, and that's a good thing. But with that increasing population of us older adults comes a shift in health service needs, in environments that can be challenging, with services more spread out, and in some areas, actually, services being absent. So it's extremely important that we as healthcare leaders and decision makers respond to this changing demographic. And one of the first things that Northern Health Board did in response to this about 2 years ago, and Charles, I can thank you for this, Northern Health led a seniors consultation across the North. And the consultation findings emphasized that people would rather live in their homes and communities for as long as they possibly could. So with that came the requirement that we need to support people to live healthy lives by helping them adopt healthy behaviors and healthy lifestyles. That's number one. And number two, we need to provide access to primary and community care. And number three, which is a little more challenging, we need to ensure access to a continuum of housing options, including assisted living and long-term care. So once we had those findings, and in follow-up to that consultation process, Northern Health completed further projections and modelings of future service needs in the North for this important growing population. And where we are right now is currently discussing these projected needs with the Ministry of Health and with our community stakeholders. And I was actually really pleased to see one of our community stakeholders who is jumping ahead and getting this moving for her community. And Margaret Sanu, you're here somewhere, could you wave? Over here. Margaret, from Kitimat, with Kitimat Valley Housing Society. They are working with the municipality, with industry, with Northern Health, with BC Housing, with the ministry, and their project is to create a dementia care-like village complex. And they've made great progress, and I think this is going to be one of the pilots for the North and a great example. And that shows collaboration, and interesting enough, a few years ago when Northern Health did its strategic plan, one of our key values was collaboration. And we need to collaborate to find solutions and support healthy aging and enabling people to live independently. And collaboration and partnerships can't be underscored across community organizations and sectors. Now, this conference has provided an important opportunity to surface these topics and has brought people together to discuss important issues to communities and people living in the North. And the sessions, I believe, were developed to enable active participation. And I must say, I think it's quite effective in achieving this. Yesterday, in the roundtable session, where the two tables came together, I know our tables had great, robust, open discussion, and I know for me, as the chair of the Northern Health Board, I found it very insightful, and I have a lot of takeaways from that discussion. So kudos for allowing that interaction to take place. That was very good. So I think these discussions will set the stage for our further work together as we support the 55 plus and the 65 plus to live healthy, fulfilling lives. And on behalf of Northern Health, thank you for attending and contributing to this very important discussion. Enjoy the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Colleen. Appreciate that. Postcards that I mentioned yesterday, if you're interested in being political, remember, send one to your local MP. Well, it's a delight to introduce Isabel McKenzie, who's next, and she has lots of things that you're going to want to hear. I met Isabel first in May 2018. John and I and a group of about a dozen people formed a delegation and decided to go to Denmark. I wish all of you could have come with us. It would give you even a higher level of enthusiasm for what's ahead had you done so. We saw amazing and marvelous things as if we could look into the future 10 years from now. And yet, on the other hand, that's Denmark, we're Canada. They're small, we're big. They have a little landmass, concentrated population, and we are very sparsely populated. They pay way more taxes than we do, and frankly, they're much more of a social welfare society. But they got it right with seniors. They've got it right with the idea of enablement, taking people into state which you find them and simply trying to make it better. On that trip, I got to know Isabel, a very sharp mind and a very committed person to seniors. She's been at it for a couple of decades, and perhaps some of you know her best for the new model of dementia care that was a national best practice. And you may well know that Isabel has been BC's CEO of the Year for nonprofit sector and nominated as a provincial healthcare hero. In her daily work as a seniors advocate, she has a lot of potential ability to see where the opportunities are and some of the realities for older adult care in the province. It's a very, very interesting thing that the government in our province has a seniors advocate. It's true, I believe, for only one other province, and I'm not sure it's the same remit as this one anyway, because within the office of the seniors advocate is the right, indeed the power, to collect meaningful data about the care and the outcomes of older adults. A powerful tool indeed, because as we repeatedly said yesterday, we can't manage much better if we don't have good data and good measurement with which to do so. Isabel now, in the job as seniors advocate, and on a personal note, recently had her mother move to the island, and I think she's beginning to find out what it's like being a mother for her mother. Please welcome Isabel. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom, and good morning. And great to get those slides up there. It's a great pleasure to be here, and maybe we could lower the lights a little bit so that people can get some contrast on the screen, if we can maybe lower these overhead lights. Or not. Okay, so as the seniors advocate for British Columbia, I am often asked, who are seniors? Thank you. Who are seniors and what do they want? And often the politicians will follow with, and how can I get them to vote for me? And I say, well, you know, that's a very easy question to ask, but it's a very difficult question to answer, because why don't you just ask me, who are people and what do they want? The hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, the experiences, the expectations of a person at the age of 65, 85, and 105 are as varied and as different as they are for someone at the age of 25, 45, and 55. The only thing that has changed is how we view a group of people who share only one singular characteristic in common. They are age 65 and over. And we have grouped them together, and we have decided there's one answer to the question, who are seniors and what do they want? And if we reflect on our society, if we did that with any other group of people who share only one characteristic, whether it is their culture, their language, their religion, their sexual orientation, their socioeconomic background, if we said that all people, simply by having that one characteristic in common, all needed and wanted the same thing, we wouldn't tolerate it. It's how we stereotype. And stereotyping of seniors is one of the most prolific examples we have in society of the isms, in this case, ageism. And to illustrate this, I ask people to cast their minds back 60 years ago to two 30-year-old women, Jane and Anne. Now, we all knew a Jane in our life, and I am certain there are some Janes in this room. Jane was that girl in school who did everything perfectly all the time. The homework was always done. The lunch was neatly wrapped in wax paper. She joined the yearbook committee. She graduated, went to secretarial school, got married, quit her job, joined the junior league, had dinner on the table in her pearl and sweater set every night at 6 o'clock. Jane was a total and complete conformist. And at every one of life's transition points, Jane did exactly what society expected her to do. Now, we treat conformists very well, by the way, because they do what we want them to. But born at the same time is Annie, the hippie chick, the iconoclast. She's not going to secretarial school. She's going on the road with Jack Kerouac. And she's going to chart her course and explore things her own way. No dinner on the table at 6, no junior league, no marriage. Two very different women, nothing in common, chalk and cheese, going off on two different complete courses in their life. We wouldn't for 1 minute think that they read the same books, go to the same countries for a vacation, watch the same movies, socialize with the same people. But something happened along the 60-year journey of life for stay-at-home conservative Jane, barricade-breaking iconoclastic Annie. They went from these strong, forceful women at 30 whose personalities were very evident, and they became seniors. They're two 90-year-old women. They must have so much in common. They're both 90, you know. In fact, they'll have so much in common, let's make them roommates. They're going to get along like a house on fire. They're two 90-year-old women. Well, with the possible exception of a shared experience with hip replacement surgery, Jane and Anne have no more in common at the age of 90 than they did at the age of 30. They're two totally different people. They've had totally different life experiences. Why would we think for 1 minute they want to sit at the same table every night and talk to each other? This could just as easily be a picture of two other very well-known seniors in the world, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. They're both seniors. Well, they must have so much in common because, you know, they're both 74, right? So I think we need to remember that because, you know, we use a lot of language. We're planning for. Here's what seniors need. Here's what seniors want. There's no single answer. There's no single solution. The only thing that seniors have in common is what we all have in common. We want what we want. But what that is very different. The challenge we face when we deal with our aging population is that we step over a line and we decide that for the health and safety of this individual, here's what's best for them. We do our stereotyping comes from a place, for the most part, of kindness. Kids love their mums and dads, and they want to keep them safe, and they want to hang on to whatever little shred of mum and dad they can for as long as they are able to. But what about mum and dad? You know, I talk about the story of Johan. And Johan is a 93-year-old widower who lives in the house he built 65 years ago, but it has bedrooms upstairs. And Johan has a lovely hand-wringing daughter called Sylvia and an officious case manager, Carol. And they come in to see Johan, and Sylvia's got these brochures from Sunnyside Acres retirement villa, and she's brought her reinforcement along with Carol. And, you know, Dad, you're going to have to move. You know, those stairs, one of these days, you're going to go up those stairs, you're going to fall, you're going to fracture your hip, you're going to go to the hospital, and you're going to die. Isn't that right, Carol? Well, you know, Johan, yeah, no, you know, speaking, yeah, these stairs are not good, you know, really it should be all on one level. And Carol, tell him about the dehydration thing. Tell him what you told me. Well, you know, it's true, Johan, you know, we're worried you're not eating properly, and if you get a little dehydrated, you might get a little dizzy, and then you'll fall, and you'll fracture your hip, and you'll go to the hospital, and you'll die. So, Dad, here's these brochures. You're going to move to this place. It's going to be great, Dad. Everything's going to be taken care of. You won't have to do a thing. You don't have to cook. You don't have to clean. You just have to sit there. Everything will be done for you. Johan's an immigrant from Germany, built this house. So Johan summons up his 93 years of wisdom, which is about 65 years more of wisdom than his daughter Sylvia has, and about 55 more years of wisdom than Carol, the case manager, has. And he turns to his daughter. So, Sylvia, go to this place of yours. I won't die. Well, come on, Dad. Be serious. Of course. Oh, no, of course. That's it. And I think that's what we need to remember when we're planning. You know, I was speaking to somebody last night who talked about when I get dementia, and I said, no. It's if I get dementia. Yet people talk about if I die. Right? We need to remember in all our planning, in all our discussions, people do not fundamentally lose the right of self-determination and the right to live at risk at a magical age. There's no expiry date on civil liberties. And I think we need to remember that, and it's difficult for us because we come to the place of wanting to make those decisions for people because we care for them as professionals and because we love them as family members. But we really do have to do a better job of understanding and accepting the right of older adults, seniors, whatever label we're going to use, to be able to live as they want to, with whom they want to, and where they want to. And our job is to support it as much as possible, but not necessarily to mitigate risk to zero. So that's part of the context that I hope will guide some of the discussions today. So let's take a look at Northern Health and seniors, where we are today and where we think we're going to be in 2031. Now here's some interesting things. Currently your population of seniors in Northern Health, 42,000 souls, 14% of your population. That's less than the provincial average. Province-wide, we have 19% of our population age 65 and over. But over the next 12, 13 years, the population over 65 in the north is going to grow to a greater extent than the population over 65 in the rest of the province. So in 2031, 22% of your population is going to be over 65, and it's only going to be 25% for the rest of the province. So you are going to experience a bigger shift in the north than the rest of us are going to experience in other parts of British Columbia. And you're still going to be less than the provincial average, but the proportional shift is going to be greater. So let's look at currently in BC how seniors in the north compare. And there are some differences and there are some surprising similarities. So let's talk about income, because having sufficient income determines a lot of things. We know it links to some of the broader determinants of health, and we also know as we age, it links very much to the choices available to us. So when you see the number in brackets, that's the provincial average. The other number is the average for BC. So when we look at the bottom 20% of income earners in the north, it's about the same as the provincial average, hovers around 17,000. A large part of that is the group that get the GIS, the OAS, and the CPP, and mixed in with that every once in a while, because this is based on tax filer data, are people who've had potentially some significant capital losses. So that's why it's just a little bit below the maximum GIS threshold. But look at the top 20%. You have fewer rich people. So the top 20% average for the province is 80,000. In the north, it's 71,000. Now shift over to 85 plus in the north and look at the top 20%, even poorer. So the top 20% of income earners in the province age 85 and over have an average income of 73,000. The top 20% of income earners over 85 in the north have an average income of 52,000. So challenge number one is that your seniors in northern BC don't have as much money as seniors in other parts of the province. And so some of the supports and options that seniors in other parts of the province can afford to buy and fund for themselves, it's not as prevalent in the north. Seniors who rent, their household income, look at that difference. 53% of seniors who rent in Northern Health have a household income of less than 20,000. That's more than half, versus a third in the rest of the province. So your renters are disproportionately poorer yet again relative to other seniors in the province. Now, in a lot of areas, you're very similar. So if we look at living independently, so at age 65, 94% of the province and 94% of people in the north live completely independently. 85, which is an age I look at measuring a lot of data from because it's the average age of a person in a long-term care home or care facility in British Columbia, 74% live independently, both in the north and in the province. That's the other big aha out there. Most people are never going to go to a care home. They're never going to need it, and they're never going to go. And that's true in the north as it is in the rest of the province. Living alone, slightly higher percentage when you look at 65 plus, 27% in the north versus 23% in the rest of BC. But when we go to the age of 85, it smooths out. It's the same. 41% live alone in the province and 41% in northern BC. Active driver's licenses, I'm not sure if this is good or not, and I think it's a reflection of the lack of alternative transportation, but people hang on to their driver's licenses longer in northern BC. And more people have driver's licenses. So at the age of 65, 90% of people in the province have a driver's license, but 95% of people in the north have a driver's license at age 65. By 85, that drops. It's 44% province-wide. It's 47% in the north. So it's a little bit higher in the north. And I think, as I say, that reflects that there's not a lot of alternative options. Retirement living, assisted living, about the same percentage living, 3% over 65 and 10% over 85. Long-term care, provincial average and northern health average, about the same, 3% over 65, 16% in the north, 15% in BC, but that number is about the same when you look at the N that we're doing it. Diagnosis of dementia, not significantly different. This is the other big aha of my friend who said, when I get dementia. Most people are never going to get dementia. Now, those of us who have lived with, worked with, know people who have dementia, particularly Alzheimer's, know what a horrific disease it is. It is an unremittingly progressive neurological disease that robs people bit by bit by bit. And it is a disease that affects everybody around the person who has the disease. But the vast majority of seniors will not develop dementia or Alzheimer's. So even at the age of 85, province-wide, 80% of people do not have a diagnosis of a dementia or an Alzheimer's. Slightly higher in northern, 83%. That's potentially a reflection of less ability for diagnostics in the north, and it may also just be a bit of wobbling around the number. The numbers are smaller for the north, and so the percentages can bump a little bit. Use of publicly subsidized home support, 3% over 65. If we look at over 85, 13% province-wide, only 9% in Northern Health, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. Use of the emergency department, seniors in the north as a percentage are using it less. So if we look at 65 plus, it's only 19% of your emergency department visits are seniors in Northern Health, compared to 25% province-wide. And only 3% are 85 plus, compared to 6% province-wide. Again, the numbers are always smaller in the north, but I think the important message there is that your emergency departments aren't being overwhelmed by seniors relative to the percentage of the population that they represent. The issue is when they get to the emergency department, what happens, and why are we admitting, and is that appropriate? Because that number looks very different. But you need to look at what is the root cause, because if we think it's about convincing people not to call 911 and having every fridge of a person over 80 with a DNR order attached with the magnet so that the paramedics don't do anything, that's not the solution, because that's not what the numbers tell us is the problem. So let's look at some indicators. We measure this in the ministry, chronic conditions, low complexity, medium complexity, and high complexity. And again, when you look at the numbers, there's not a lot of difference between Northern Health and the rest of the province. What is also interesting to note, even at the age of 85 plus, only just over a third of people 85 plus, both provincially and in Northern Health, have chronic conditions of high complexity and high need. And about a quarter are medium complexity, medium need. And that's the target audience right in there, the medium and high complexity chronic conditions. Low complexity chronic conditions, that can be managing blood pressure. and that can be managed effectively. So again, we need to take a step back and remember that the picture of seniors in Northern Health, like in British Columbia and arguably like in Canada, is that most are relatively happy, or healthy, pardon me, relatively healthy, compared to what I think the perception is of health. Let's look at subsidized long-term care beds per 1,000 of target population. So if we look at Northern BC, there's 28.4 long-term care beds per 1,000 of population 65 and plus, about on average, on provincial average is 29.3, so about on par. And if we look at 85 plus, however, now again, part of the challenge with North is that the numbers are small, and so these can be distorted, but 311 beds compared to a provincial average of 232, interestingly enough. Subsidized assisted living per 1,000, actually Northern appears to be doing fairly well relative to the rest of the province. It's showing 7 beds per 1,000 on a population average of 4.6. And if we look at 85 plus, it's showing 76.4 beds relative to 36.6 for the rest of the province. Again, the N is small. It's always a challenge in the North. But the numbers reverse when we look at home support per 1,000. So 65 plus in terms of hours, 5,290 hours per population versus a provincial average of 8,200. And if we look at 85 plus, 17,843 compared to a provincial average of 31,045. And that, I'm going to talk a lot about that and the home support, because when we talk about supporting seniors to live in their own homes for as long as possible, what we're talking about, yes, it's important to have a family doctor. Yes, it's important to be able to have access to specialist service. Yes, it's important. But it's the day-to-day activities and the ability to manage those that are the difference between I can live in my own home, I have to go to a care facility. It's not about whether I have a primary care team. It's not about whether I have to wait to see my specialist. Those are all important, and they're all big macro issues. But if you solve all those issues and you still don't have this foundational issue of the day-to-day activities and how they're managed, it isn't going to matter. Alternative level care days share as inpatient days. This is where the data get really interesting in the difference between Northern Health. And I know my friends from Northern Health, and I do consider you my friends, not sure it's reciprocated, will recognize and appreciate these. So you can see on your left the Northern Health numbers, and on the right the BC numbers. And just whichever way we slice this, whether we look at it as a share of inpatient days, whether we look at average length of stay, in Northern Health, we have a much higher percentage of folks in our hospitals that arguably do not need to be there relative to the rest of BC, who also, by the way, thinks they have a big problem. So let's look at the home support hours per client per year. The bottom line, the lighter green, is Northern Health. The higher line is the BC average. And you can see that it's wobbled a bit in Northern Health, and I know there may be some data issues, but there's a fairly consistent pattern in a number of different measures that are telling us, whether it's the client count, the hours per client, that we're just not getting the service in Northern Health that we should. And by the way, the province as a whole is not doing a very good job on this either. Adult day programs, which really are more about support for the caregiver. Yes, the recipient of the services at the adult day program does benefit, but really those of us who've worked in the community appreciate and understand that really adult day programs are about relief and meaningful relief for the caregiver. And as you can see, in days delivered per year, we've been dropping quite a bit in Northern Health. Provincially, we've had a bit of an uptake, although we're still not at the levels we were at 2015, 2016. And it just bedevils me why we aren't taking a more aggressive approach to increasing our capacity in adult day programs. The ministry has announced new funding, and in practical terms, the measurement of the results of that funding usually take about 3 years. And so hopefully we will see those numbers improve. Assisted living wait list. You can see the Northern Health numbers, and you can see the BC numbers. And Northern Health has 317 people on the wait list compared to the BC 870, and proportionally, that's a lot more than Northern Health's proportion of the population. And as you can see, wait list as a proportion of total units, you have more than one person waiting for every unit that you have available in Northern Health, and the rest of the province is at 20%. And so that's very telling. That's very telling when you look at where you might need to increase capacity. Oops, hang on, I went. Okay, and the long-term care waiting list. So as of March 31st, 2019, there were 337 people waiting for long-term care in Northern Health. Average wait time is 224 days compared to the BC average of 96 days. And the average length of stay in a Northern Health long-term care facility is much higher as well. Like care needs in long-term care, and some of you will have heard me talk about this before, and this is not unique to Northern Health, although it is a larger problem in Northern Health. In this province, we have, at any given time in our care facilities, around 20% of our residents who do not need to be there. There's a bunch of different measures one can use. I tend to use one that those of us who've practiced understand, which is our Activities of Daily Living score and our CPS, our Cognitive Performance score. And those of us who've worked in home and community care and in long-term care know if a person has a combination of ADL 2 or less and CPS 2 or less, they in no way, shape, or form need to be in a long-term care facility. 22% of the residents in Northern Health care facilities meet that criteria. 17% province-wide. What's interesting is an even higher percentage when I look province-wide. Upon admission, province-wide, it's 22% that meet that criteria. And what's also interesting is when we look at what was their score upon admission, we also look what were the home supports they received prior to admission. You should see a continuum. 61%, 6 out of 10, BC seniors admitted to a care facility in this province had no home support prior to admission, 90 days prior, so effectively they didn't have it. And 22% of them are ADL 2 or less, CPS 2 or less. Now, I know Northern Health has done a lot of modeling on this work. I've seen their work. It's better than this work. It's more detailed. It drills down more. And they've identified upon admission and then improvement. And the story keeps getting bigger around, wait just a minute here, before we rush out and build a whole bunch of long-term care beds, because once you build them, you will fill them. Before we do that, let's take a very careful look at who's in those beds, at who needs to be there. Let's reflect on what people tell us they want, where they want to live, how they want to live, with whom they want to live. Let's look at the supports that we're providing there, and let's figure out how to get this better. On average, and it will be higher in Northern Health because you have lower incomes, on average we are subsidizing a long-term care resident to the tune of about $4,500 a month. It's a range, and we are subsidizing some of them to the tune of about $5,300, $5,400 a month. That buys a lot of care in the community, a lot of care. And we are falling far, far short of meeting that threshold. Common sense. If we're going to spend $5,300 on you in a long-term care facility, why don't we spend $5,300 on you in the community, right? in just the most basic analysis. And yet we fall significantly short of that. So what are the challenges? Well, I have spent a lot of time in northern and rural BC in this job. I'm a city girl. Victoria is the smallest city I have ever lived in. I can still remember when my parents dragged me there. I could not believe the backwater town of Victoria that I had been brought to. I have spent my entire professional career in an urban setting, and I can tell you that we had no lack of a list of things we needed and didn't have in Victoria. And then I became the Seniors Advocate, which is a provincial office. And I went not just to the Lower Mainland and Victoria, but to Prince George, to Fort St. John, to Cranbrook, to Kitimat, to Prince Rupert, and talked to the seniors and talked to the healthcare practitioners. And I was blown away by what rural and northern BC does not have. I am blown away by what you don't complain about. Not by what you do, but by what you don't. When I would go to Quesnel and talk about overnight and live-in home support, and they'd go, "What is that?" "Oh, well, we did that in Victoria. Oh no, we can send somebody home from the home. We just send the carried in overnight." "Oh, well, that sounds pretty nice." When we talk about getting the OT out there to meet you on the discharge from the hospital, I mean, people are just agog at what it is, and yet we don't think it's good enough in Victoria. And so I think one of the things that I am very committed to is how we can improve. There's things we can't change about living in rural and northern BC, but there are some things we can do better. One of the things we can't change is a lack of critical mass. So one of the observations is that, and your mayor talked about housing, and I hear a lot about that. It's an issue everywhere, but the solutions are going to be different in rural and northern BC, in large part because there's no private sector solution. So if you're a senior on the Lower Mainland, you sell your house for $1 million, you can go get a condominium for $600,000. You put $400,000 in your pocket, you got a better environment, everybody's happy, government doesn't need to help you. You can't do that in northern and rural BC because the private market isn't out there building all these condominiums because there's not the critical mass. And so government's going to have to rethink its role because governments don't like to be playing where the marketplace is able to provide, but it looks different in rural and northern BC. We're going to have to look at what is going to be the role of government. We're going to have to look at costs. So when we fund in school districts, we recognize we pay more per pupil in rural and northern BC than we do in the Lower Mainland. It costs more because we've got to bus them. We've got the costs are higher, right? And we've got to recognize it's going to cost more to care for people in northern BC. We don't have the critical mass. We don't have some of the economies of scale, and we have big distances that we have to travel. And I think we're a few years away from everybody having an electric vehicle. The other challenge is labor. And everybody's crying out, it's the new bandwagon everybody's jumping on. Good help is so hard to find, and no, we can't, no, and all these very dramatic terms. Everybody, I'm struck by, nobody can ever have just a problem anymore. You have to have a crisis, right? No such thing as, we do have, I'm not sure that, the sky is falling and it's a crisis province-wide. We certainly have a very, very tight labor market in BC, and we don't know how long this tight labor market will prevail. But when you go to the Lower Mainland, you can find people in large part because that's where the immigrant community goes. When you come up to the north, you've got competition from low-skill, high-wage jobs. That's an unusual combination. We don't have that in the Lower Mainland. You have that in communities like Fort St. John, where somebody can be a camp cook for $100,000 a year, and they need nothing other than food safe. Try to convince them to take the 6-month training course to be a care aide to sign up for a casual shift. Right? Very tricky. Very, very tricky. Again, we don't know how long the phenomenon of the low-skill, high-wage jobs are going to last, but they are a different aspect to the labor competition in the north relative to the rest of the province. Limited local training. So at the most basic level, care aides, you need to be trained. It's about a 6-month training course, and you can't do all of it online. There has to be practical training, and you want to be very careful about certifying a person who trained only online that nobody's actually put eyes on, and that's limited in the north. You go to the lower mainland, dime a dozen in terms of the places that you can go and get the training. And certainly as you scale up, whether it's LPNs, whether it's RNs, whether it's OTs, whether it's PTs, again, much more limited local training available. I think the presence of UNBC and the efforts that they've made to bring training up here and to have practicums up here is brilliant. Because the other observation I have is that in the north, you're not just recruiting amongst northerners to take that job. So in the lower mainland, we're simply trying to convince you to be a care aide instead of a barista. In the north, you have got to convince people to move to the north for the job. I've reflected on how many people I've met, mostly women, as I've toured about over the last few years, who will talk about, I came to the north 2 years ago, 30 years ago, right? It's probably some of you in the audience that resonates with. And inevitably when you ask them their story, it's related to, I came up here as, I got a job as a nurse, I got a job as a teacher, my husband got a job in the mill, my husband got a job in the plant, right? All of them link to good middle-class jobs that people came up here for. So some of you will remember graduating university as I did, and all my friends who were going to be teachers. You had two choices. You could supply teach in the cities for 10 years as a casual and maybe get a job, or you could move to Dog Creek or Rupert or somewhere and you get a full-time job right away as a teacher. We've got to do that with the healthcare jobs, and we're not doing it. We've got to rethink. In part because we're not accustomed to thinking of the care aide job at $52,000, $53,000 a year as that kind of job, but that's what we've got to sell in the north, and we've got to sell it. You got to come up to, you're not going to recruit people up for casual shifts in the hope that in 10 months they'll get a regular line. It's not going to work that way. The north has got to find a way to talk to, whether it's HEABC, whether it's the government, whether it's the unions, whether it's whoever, and say, we are different. We have the same problems, but our solutions are not the same as they are in other parts of the province, and you have got to allow us to do it differently. Also around client direct funding. So the other thing that could revolutionize, particularly when you look at the incomes in the north, is the ability to just put the money in the hands of the family, and they will find the ability to get the care that they need for their mom and dad. You can hire a live-in caregiver for about $3,800 a month. We can fund you to do that, and you're going to find that live-in caregiver far more easily than we're going to find the people who can work the various shifts. So I think that the future, when we look at the opportunities, there is no reason why Northern Health and the North cannot successfully care for seniors to age in this community. But it is going to require a fundamental shift in the way we think and in the way we do things. And to say, we can't do it that way in the North because, and it is different. And probably the biggest challenge you have is that everybody you're going to be talking to about these issues doesn't live here, right? They don't usually come from here either. And that is a challenge not to be underestimated. But I have great confidence in the overwhelming capacity and resilience of British Columbians who live in northern and rural BC, because you have significantly more fortitude than your latte-sipping, spandex-wearing, bike-riding brethren in the West End of Vancouver.
I got the hook here.
And I think that you will harness that and be a force to be reckoned with. And I wish you good luck in your deliberations today, and look forward to coming back and hearing about successes in the North. So I really want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you, and thank you, Tom, for organizing this event.
Isabel McKenzie. Okay, moving right along. Enormous amount of food for thought there. That's why the breakout sessions are going to be interesting. We want to keep the momentum going. Just like yesterday, you'll recall you were very patient and we pushed a lot of wonderful content at you. We're going to do one more of those now. And then we have an opportunity to make some sense of what we've heard. I'm delighted that we have Anne Possett, a physician, medical staff of University Hospital of Northern British Columbia. Been a family doctor for about 20 years, but has moved now progressively away from practice and is doing occupational health, injury prevention, and now more progressively things associated with population health. She worked with the 2015 Canada Winter Games and co-chaired the British Columbia Physical Activity Council under the ministry. She's been involved with a bunch of research teams, both at UBC and UNBC, looking at health-enhancing physical activity and implementation of community-based physical activity interventions in older adults. So this is part of the whole agenda that has permeated our program here, is that let's stay as healthy as long as we can, and then as potential things beset us, whether it's frailty or dementia, that we look to ameliorate the impact as soon and as early as possible. So Anne has a number of audiovisual clips that she's going to show this morning as well to get us into the program. And I've been praying to the audio-visual gods all night that it'll all work. Anne Possett, please, where are you? Please join me in welcoming Anne.
Thanks very much.
Okay, super, thanks. Okay, well, thanks very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you about healthy aging from a little bit different perspective. I'm going to do the formal things I have to do as part of the CPD accreditation. So those are my affiliations. Actually, hang on, we gotta keep going here. Top one, thank you. This is not my area of expertise presenting, but anyway, let's keep going. So that's my affiliations. As disclosure and potential conflict of interest, I do wear a few hats. I sit on a lot of different committees, and some of these I do receive small honorariums for, but none of them are my sort of a primary source of income. And those are the two sort of current research projects going on at the moment, and I've also been involved with Move the North research team up at UNBC, and that's where healthy aging in the North kind of taps into that piece. So the videos that we're going to see, the vignettes that kind of exemplify some of the principles of healthy aging, were produced as a collaborative project with Active Aging BC, Promotion of Wellness in Northern BC, which is a small northern think tank around this. We've got a few people from our board here in the room, as well as some collaboration with a number of nonprofits in and around Prince George. And half of them are from Cranbrook and half are from Prince George. So some of you will recognize places that you know. The learning objectives are really to understand the WHO definition of healthy aging. So I'm taking us in a very different direction than a lot of the other speakers have been. And with that, looking at the definition is really a chance to look at the framework that has set out sort of this global agenda around healthy aging, and then to look at that framework in terms of what does it tell us? How can we identify where those multi-sector opportunities are? And I mean, people have already highlighted many of them this morning already, but I think if we look at these videos, we think about this framework, what is healthy aging? Where are the spheres of influence? And we all wear different hats, have different life experiences, and we can all have something to contribute. And I think in the breakout sessions, hopefully that will come forward there. So the definition of aging from the World Health Report on Aging is simple and maybe different than we typically think of in healthcare. The process, so it's not some end point. It's not a static condition. It's a process of developing and maintaining functional ability that enables well-being in older age. So the key word there, sorry. Okay, thank you. The key word there is functional ability and well-being. And well-being is something that we as individuals define, and what we want in terms of that is very different. We're all individuals, and our functional abilities and what's important to us are different as well. Sorry, go back. So when we look at functional ability, it's defined as being health-related attributes that enable people to be and to do what they have reason to value. So I'm thinking of Isabel's example of those two women who have very, very different reasons to be and things that they would want to do. And so the functional abilities that each of them might need at that point might look very, very different. So we're going to play a vignette, if our IT is working. And this is Bill, and Bill is from Cranbrook.
Right about here or down?
Right about there, yeah.
Right here. And I'll set the brakes, put it in gear, there. Okay, just sit on it, okay. There. King Tuna Shed Island. On a farm, we grew all our vegetables. We lived about 100 yards from the river, and if we wanted a fish for breakfast, I just want to go and catch a fish for breakfast. Yeah. I gave up my driver's license. When I turned 91, I said it was time to give it up. They was very slow because I can't find enough to do. And I got a scooter for my son. I go to the hospital with it, and I go see a doctor with it, and I shop with it. Yeah, I wish there was a place where you could exercise here, swimming pool or anything like that. But winter time comes. If I didn't have the Sartre, there'd still be a hull of bales or something. And library, yeah, I miss that because it's so far away. Maybe an animal or two to look after, even a chicken or something like that. I love gardening. Well, I just love to see him grow. That was my main interest here.
And so he saw this wagon, and he thought it would be a good idea for him to have it here as a greenhouse. He asked me if I wasn't using it, and I said I wasn't. So I built this cage to keep his plants in, so those fellas right over there don't eat it. And that was his little greenhouse hobby.
I just wanted to have something that I was interested in.
So, you look at Bell and you think about functional abilities, and he's figured out a number of things to give his life value and to be able to do the things he wants to do, and that's a different story than some of the other people you're going to see. Now, I wanted to bring voices of people that live in the North more directly into how we're thinking today. And I'm going to bring a few more key findings from the Northern Health consultation that was done in 2013. And instead of focusing on some of the bigger picture pieces like living in place, I want to talk about what people felt or what was important to them about health, what health actually meant to them. And these were the key concepts. So wellness, being a balance between all the different aspects of health, as opposed to just physical health. The sense of community and the ability to contribute. Social connections and choice, maintaining control over their circumstances, being able to determine what was important to them and being able to make that happen. And so we're going to look at Vince and his perspective.
When our ancestors left India to go to replace the slaves in South America, there was a disconnect with their history being recorded. I didn't realize how important photographs were until 1988. I took about 1,000 pictures, people's lifestyle, and now their children that are born overseas are disconnected from that lifestyle. There was no fairness in the place where I lived, in the plantation where I lived. So I think that set the tone for my social justice work in Canada. When I retired, it took me into retirement. I think the satisfaction I get is helping other people. And I think that's where my lifestyle is now. But I felt that I need to do something more constructive in my physical health. And then I investigated and found out that Y has a senior program. And I started going to that a couple of years ago. It was very awkward when I first went. Actually, there was a little bit of embarrassment because there was only 3 guys in the class and 35 women. I think it's a learning process. In the earlier days, the aerobics would start and there was certain exercise I couldn't do, and I would just stand there and just move slightly, and I would be resting while I do that. And the instructors always encourage that. So it becomes a very close group now. It becomes a little bit personal. There are birthday parties. It's like an information sharing place also. Aerobics alone is not the only thing that will improve my life. There's a balance. There's a spiritual balance, there's a mental balance, there's a physical balance, and there's a relationship balance. And there's no one is more important than the other one. You need a balance in all of that to have a healthy life, I think.
Okay, so you can hear Vince's voice is very much echoing what was found in that Northern Health consultation around the more holistic view of what creates health and well-being in his retirement years. So another place where Northern Voices was a piece of research that I actually did as part of my Master of Public Health thesis project, and these are kind of the key factors that came from those who were living unassisted in the community but were between 65 and 85. And ability to participate in chosen activities was very, very dominant as a contributor to their health. Maintaining independence and control, having good relationships, opportunities for social interaction, and making a contribution to community. And I want to emphasize that making a contribution to community, because I think when we often are focused on what are we going to do, what are the needs, but there's a huge value in this segment of our lives, and I'm heading there very soon myself, that we have yet to contribute. And I think when we don't think about that need and want to contribute, and also the incredible resource of people after they've retired to bring into our communities to create healthy communities, then we're going to miss a piece. And we know they're telling us that that ability to contribute is contributing to their health. So we don't want to forget that. So in terms of value and meaning of health, everybody in my study, like literally 100%, described health in terms of their functional abilities. Most expressed rationales to maximize their health and had goals really to focused on independence. They didn't want to lose their driver's license. They didn't want to have to move. They wanted to be able to get to bridge or whatever their chosen activities and places to be were. And the other dominant theme was that there was an acceptance of limitations and change and a need to adapt, but very much juxtaposed with a fear of frailty. And so I think that's that balance of yesterday where, you know, there was a lot of conversation about, you know, addressing that frailty, trying to transition those pieces. So this is there, but it's not a dominant piece, but it's there. It's sitting in the back of people's minds as they age. And again, I think that some of the breakout sessions where we're talking about how do we bridge some of these pieces, perhaps that can be a connecting point there. And then I think the other thing that, and Isabel again addressed it, is that it was very dominant in my research that ageism is really alive and well in the community, in our health systems, and even amongst older adults themselves. And I'm a very optimistic person, and I was quite shocked at that finding. And I know that it's now in the Global Action Plan for Aging and Health. It's one of the number one things that we're meant to address within the health system. So I want to point that out. And in Northern BC, in my own research, it was definitely a very, very strong finding. So some of the voices: motivation driven by desire for independence. So if you don't have health, you're very restricted in what you can do. I'm going out of my way to see that I stay as healthy as I can for as long as I can because I don't want to be in a home. And then this was from a more recent study done by one of our honors students up at UNBC with the support of Chelsea Pelche, and I was mentoring on the qualitative research side. You know, I didn't want to get old before my time. I would miss out on all this stuff. So again, this wanting to age well, this desire to not see themselves as old and to keep doing the things they want to do. So let's have a look at Dick's story.
Nothing, wrong with good, clean, shoulder-to-shoulder competition. In Holland, I was primarily interested in bike racing. When I came here, I took up running. Yeah, that sort of evolved into the senior games, where I'm still active in track and field. I don't know how active I'll be this year. The back injury started as a complaint. I saw the surgeon overnight, no more pain. Awesome. But I've lost a lot of strength, and not having done anything for about a year. You know, the Iceman, and I've done it many years solo, but eventually that became a little too much, adjusting to, limitations of age. I started putting a team together.
And what do you think of Dick as a manager?
He tries.
Give the truth, or do you want to?
He's being tolerated.
The activity gets reduced, but my involvement is still there. It's a necessity. Just like breathing, I'd like to be involved. And I'll do my share to maintain that.
Okay, so with those sort of scenarios in mind, let's dig a little deeper in terms of the concept of healthy aging using this lens from the WHO. And I want to reflect a little bit on some of the terms that you hear out there. We're hearing lots about active aging for a while, and that was a term coined started around 1990, and around 2002, the WHO produced the first policy document around the area of older aging and health, and they picked active aging at that time to be inclusive of things more than the health system and the things we typically think. So it was to give it a broader sense. It wasn't actually about activity, which a lot of people have thought it was. In the newer policy framework that's laid out in the 2015 World Report, they wanted to move to a different concept, a different construct, if you like, around how we think about healthy aging, because it really does identify where we can find places to do our bit to contribute to this. And if we think about the fact that we are all aging, the day we're born, we're aging. So this is all of our trajectory, and there are places for all of us at any point in our life course to be working on this or to be thinking about it. And I think we often get in our silos of our sphere, our area of work, or else our silos of life. You're a parent with small children. But in fact, all the things that are along our life course are probably impacting our ability to age as healthfully as we want to. And I think that's, again, another perspective we can think about as we look later more in the workshops at where we can make a difference and where there's opportunity for action. So the WHO says healthy aging is relevant for everybody. It's a process, and it's about developing and maintaining functional ability. And functional ability is comprised of our intrinsic capacity, our physical, mental, cognitive abilities, and our the things that are in our environment that affect our life, and then the interaction and play between the two. And there's a long list there of areas that we have to think about, and we'll dig a little deeper into that as we go. So this is just to try to break it out. And this is really my takeaway for you today is that we've got just two pieces. There's this intrinsic piece, which I think was a lot of time spent on yesterday. And then there's the environment, and that's where the voices of our patient partners, community members are really important to help us understand that side better and maybe how the health system can be better connected to that piece. But it's the interaction of these two things that really contribute to our functional ability. So if you think about Bill, he had some mobility issues, but he had a scooter. He lived in a town where he could get around. So his environment plus his intrinsic capacity gave him actually quite a great functional ability for what he wanted to do in life. But if that was middle of winter, as he mentioned, it wouldn't be quite so great. So again, just thinking about there's this interaction of two, and none of these things are static. They're changing all the time as our physical conditions change, but also as we have to move into different environments. So we've heard a lot touched on in the area of the environmental factors, so we know what those are. We all wear different hats. So again, as you are in those breakout sessions, maybe keeping this in mind, depending on where you're working or where you're coming from. And then the intrinsic capacity, basically, that the combined physical and mental capacities that we have at any point in time. And again, that's changing through our life course. It's changing, and you can see in Dick's story how he's adapted and changed. He used to do the Iceman, which is a 5-segment marathon, if you like, in Prince George, done in winter, and now he's the manager of the team. And so his intrinsic capacity came down, but the way the community event works, he still had a place to be just as involved, and so he's enjoying a very healthy engagement in that activity. So I'm going to look at Bonnie. We've got the wrong video.
We've done that one.
we need Bonnie.
To the audiovisual gods, please work.
Well, for a while, I knew my depression was really affecting me. I knew that. Where I live is subsidized from the government. It's a beautiful apartment. Everything's wonderful about it. But it doesn't keep you company. It's the solitude, lack of friends. What my purpose is, I'm not needed to babysit anymore. God, is that what our life has come to? That that's all the options we have, just to wait and to die? I thought after 2 years, maybe it's time to get off the couch and out of this complete depression of mine. I can't do everything. Well, most likely it's from this COPD. My energy just sort of is up sometimes where I go out and do grocery shopping, and then I'm kaput. But when I'm up and feeling good, then I want to be involved in something. There's a seniors quilting guild that I go to, and I felt at home right off the bat when I first started quilting with this group of women.
He fixed his mother-in-law's knees like that, and he squeaked a bit or something when she walked, so he wanted everybody
Well, see,
to
not everybody
know.
would fix their mother-in-law's knees. And I thought, wow, there's laughter here, and there's conversation going on, and there's all kinds of things, that I can learn for myself.
I watched that tow truck show on TV. Yeah. Highway to Hell.
Quilting's brought something into my life that was fulfilling. So I can't change yesterday, can't change that. But I can believe in myself that my life is worth it for me. For me.
Okay, so now we get to the messy diagram. It's a little bit hard to read, but I wanted to put this up even though it's a bit difficult. I think that the top two curves on there, which show functional ability and intrinsic capacity, changing from a high and stable capacity on the left over to a significant loss of capacity, is the area that there was lots of work done yesterday around thinking about those changes, the pre-frailty and whatnot. And if you look down below, you can see the spheres of influence around those different stages across the life course, health services, long-term care, and the environment, which I like to think of as kind of the community, the pieces out there in the community that are supporting and contributing to capacity enhancing opportunity. So the area I work in primarily is sort of this place between the health system, academia, and the community. So more on the left side of that. I've spent my first 20 years more on the right, and this part of my career I'm on the left. And so I want us to try and get out of our healthcare roles and think a little bit about, if you look at where the opportunities are, they're probably more down in the environments in that early phase, that high and stable capacity. And so, how can the health system be supporting and encouraging people to be involved in their communities, in their environment, because we know that's going to contribute to healthy aging? And how can we impact policy to support that? the ability to access a program sometimes costs money. There's transportation. There's all those other issues. So it's all interconnected. And again, I think some of the breakout groups will identify some of those barriers and needs, and then we can maybe put some policy recommendations forward. So if we want to improve and maintain functional ability, which is the single biggest determinant of healthy aging, we can modify intrinsic capacity, the care system, physical activity interventions, cognitive things, a lot of the stuff that more of us are familiar with. And then if we want to modify the environmental factors, we can look at strengthening resources, enabling access, reducing barriers. So we're in that other realm. And clearly we need to work in both areas to maximize and optimize healthy aging. So these are just some of the things that are going on in northern BC that I'm a little bit familiar with, and you've seen some examples in these stories. And the senior centers, hopefully we'll have time for one last video that will show you some of the things there, but those are a really core place where a lot of really important destination for people to get out, social connection. And they're very active but under-resourced. And so I think if we listen to what people want and we think about where some of these things can happen in our communities, that we need to think about those centers. The YMCA is partnered with Northern Health and with the United Way and other organizations and does provide a lot of programs. And we also have Choose to Move, which I'll show you a little bit more about in Northern BC, which is a choice-based program that helps people find ways to increase activity and get out and decrease their social isolation. And then there's an innovative program in Prince George called Active Health Solutions, which if you're in the breakout on healthy aging, we'll dig into a little bit more. So Choose to Move. This comes out of Acting Aging BC. It was funded initially through the Provincial Physical Activity Strategy, and it's been in all of those communities in northern BC. It's been delivered by different agencies. Some of them are the municipal recreation program. Some of them have been through United Way grants to nonprofits, and some have been through the YMCA of northern BC. And this is a 6-month program of getting people out, looking at increasing their physical activity, getting out of the house, increasing their social engagement. And it's 6 months because most of these program type interventions we do in community, if they're less than 6 months, you don't get strong adherence. And this has been evidence-based and shown to actually being effective. So, and there's a little bit more rollout of that coming in the north in the next 2 years as well. And that's just a snapshot of Active Health Solutions. Again, it's a little bit more focused on activity, but the thing that gets people there is the coffee and the socialization, and then they get the benefit of being able to, again, address what they want to do. Some people come through the door and are hardly able to walk, and their goal is to be able to walk, around the block. And so it really takes people from where they are and gets them to where they want to go. And they also do some fun stuff and talk about healthy food. So back to that framework. So if we're, just gonna stand here. If we want to go back to this framework and think about this from a life course perspective, and then think about the key concepts here. That aging is a life course phenomena. We're all on that journey. Health is more than the absence of disease. And in my own research, one of the dominant themes that came out, because everybody had at least 3 chronic diseases, the concept was that health in the presence of disease. All of these people who we might think of as sick and having disease, their perception was that they were healthy and they were doing things to improve their health. So sometimes we have to get our heads around a different way of thinking about health and disease. Many people consider what we talk about as chronic diseases as just an aspect of aging, as opposed to it's just a reality of life, and they're still pursuing health, and what health means to them has a whole lot more to do with functional ability and what they can do and where they can go than the pieces that we might be looking at, hemoglobin A1Cs, et cetera. So, and then healthy aging trajectories are impacted by intrinsic factors and environment, and then we have opportunities in both those realms to make a difference. And I think that some of those community-based interventions that I showed you are places where we actually impact both. So people go to a program, they gain the social opportunity, that they have that opportunity to contribute, but at the same time, they've become more active, they're engaging their brain, and I think that's what some of these stories show us, that there is a way, there are things that are impacting both that we maybe don't think about when we're sitting in our healthcare roles. So again, thinking back, it's a process, there's a number of ways that we can touch that, and I'm going to keep going here. In the workshop, we're going to look at the Global Strategy and Action Plan and some of their sort of key strategy areas, and depending on who's in the room, for the healthy aging one, we'll dig a little deeper into where the opportunities are. And I think we're coming up to lunch, so I'm going to let you see Ethel on your way out. Or not lunch, it's coffee, I believe. Yes, okay. Here we go, Ethel.
I'm not one just to sit still. I do my laundry and my house cleaning and my cooking and baking. And in my house, my own house, I have stairs that come up to our top room, to the main room, and down to the basement. So I'm walking quite a bit in my own house. I try to keep busy, even though I have macular degeneration and I've already lost the vision in my right eye. I don't want to give up. I enjoy line dancing. My husband will take me in the car. Being with other people that enjoy the same thing that I do, it's a lot of fun. It keeps me coming back because it's a bit of exercise, especially in the wintertime when it's too snowy to go for a walk. I just want to dance with you. It's really good mentally because you have to try and remember the patterns. Rumbas or cha-chas and waltzes. When you stop one pattern and go into another one, it really makes your mind stop and think. And I think that's good for me because it keeps me active.
Yes, I do. Ain't that true? You won't get embarrassed by the things I do. I just want to dance with you.
It just makes you feel good.
The boys are playing softly and the girls are too. So am I, and so are you. If this was a movie, we'd be right on cue. And I just want to dance with you. I want to dance with you. Twirl you all around the floor.
So, 5 stories, lots of different functional abilities, but all of them look pretty happy. So I hope that provides some food for thought. And just as a small piece for some of us who I'd never seen line dancing before. I went and had a look at this and I couldn't believe it. These people did that for an hour without stopping. And so that's a lot of activity and a lot of brain power. And so just, again, another practical thing. It's happening in most of the senior centers and so lots of people have an opportunity to access that at very low cost. So thank you.
Please join. Thanks. Wow, if this morning hasn't given you food for thought, I'm not sure what would. We've had a veritable banquet. So you get to have a break now for 15 minutes, but perhaps just to explain how the rest of the morning will work out before lunch. Because we've heard a lot, we now have to think about what we've heard, make sense of it, and particularly today, move more towards what might we do with what we've heard. And as you think through that, could I ask you to indulge us to be as practical as possible. No point in telling us to solve world hunger or poverty. What can reasonably within our span of interests and controls get done? So please try to be prescriptive, perhaps, in some of the things that you have in your breakout sessions, the advice that you want to give us. Remember, we're collecting all of this together into the proceedings, and it ought to provide extremely important information on which we can act in the future. So there will be 4 breakout groups, and so you're treated to any one that you want to go to. Certainly, Anne now will lead one on healthy aging, and that will be in room 202, 203. So Anne Pouzette, 202, 203 on healthy aging. John Muscaderi is going to go deeper now, and we saw the start of the conversation about avoid yesterday with Rita's talk show host activity, and today we'll go much deeper than that. John Muscaderi with Avoid and Avoiding Frailty, room 207. Ray Markham, joined by Fraser Bell, will discuss risk. And risk here now broadly through being aware of it, accepting it, and ameliorating it in varieties of different ways. Ray Markham, Fraser Bell, room 205, 206. And then Isabel McKenzie will go further with some of the things that she said today and engender a conversation about reality and promise in BC, room 103. Let me go through those again if I can. Healthy aging with Anne in 202, 203. Avoiding frailty with John in 207. Risk with Ray and Fraser in 205, 206. And reality and promise with Isabel in 103. Now, after the breakouts, and the breakouts that you're about to go into should end at around 1:45. If you want to end earlier, feel free. If you want to eat during lunch, go right ahead. But we'll try to end the breakouts at around 1:45. Brief lunch today, folks. Brief lunch. So be nimble. A short lunch, soup sandwich, because we only have a half hour. We've cut lunch short so we can get finished early. And we are, am I making it up? New numbers, okay. We want to be out of here. Absolutely, my promise to you, my commitment to you is that we'll be done. Absolutely done by 2:30, so you'll know what your trajectory to the airport is and arrangements that you need to otherwise make, etc. Now, I got some new numbers. And thank you to the audio-visual help and support that we had. That worked all well. Prayers answered. Okay, so for Anne and healthy aging, 207, please, for healthy aging. For John Muscaderi and Avoid, 103, please. Ray and Fraser for Risk, 202, 203. And Reality and Promise with Isabel, 205, 206. I'll do that again. Anne Pouzette, 207. John Muscaderi, 103. Ray and Fraser on Risk at 202, 203. And Isabel McKenzie, 205, 206. And we will have a recorder in each of those rooms, so we'll capture your content. And thank you very much. Enjoy your break.
Okay, well, we may as well start. It's 11, a bit past 11:15, so we don't have a lot of people in the room, which will be great to have a great discussion, but maybe we can have everybody come closer to the front. And unfortunately, I have to stand up here because this is being live streamed, so this is the only way that they can hear us on the live stream. And then at the end, when we report, we'll have a microphone to speak into. So the session today is we were going to discuss the Avoid Frailty strategy that we are at CFN we're developing and are going to implement that much more widely across Canada as we go along. But this is great to get feedback specifically around these three or four questions up there. So first of all, maybe keep this in mind as we go along. So the first question is how can the Avoid strategy be implemented in communities such as Prince George? What are the enablers and community resources that can be used to increase its uptake? What are the local barriers and how can they be addressed? And are there any other aspects that we should address in this strategy? And the format of the slides will change as we go forward. The slides I'm going to present are a mixture, are designed, some of them are designed to be delivered to lay audiences and some to more academic communities. So I'd appreciate comments on what specific things sat in the slides. We had a strategy this morning with a group of citizens and patients, and it was great, and we had a huge amount of feedback, which is just amazing, and we'll use that to develop our citizen or lay slides as we go forward. So I'm just going to, the format today is what we're going to do is I'll go through the slides, then I'm going to have you put in maybe in your groups in a couple of tables and discuss those key questions, and then have appoint somebody from each group to report back to address some of those questions. Okay, so just to start off, I'm not going to give the background on frailty which accompanies this slide deck because that's been, we went through that in details, but the messaging is, so this is the messaging as that frailty as a condition of reduced function and health and in older adults, and older adults are much more susceptible to adverse health outcomes. And the key message is that frailty is not an inevitable part of aging, which is the strategy. And so also we need to understand that frailty is common. The risk of becoming frail can be reduced. The severity of frailty can be improved when it's present, or its progression halted when it is present. We need both social and healthcare systems changes needed to improve care, and need to increasingly adopt a public health approach to frailty, which is this strategy. And it's important to have evidence-based interventions that can be delivered at the community or population level, and this will be increasingly rolled out with public health units or as a public health-based strategy. So what are the elements of Avoid? They are the 5 key elements, and we heard about them yesterday, and they're activity, vaccination, optimization of medications, reduction of social isolation, and diet and nutrition. And I'm going to go through each of them in more detail than yesterday, than we had yesterday. And so the first one is activity. And so why do we think that activity is important? there's a lot of basic science behind why activity is crucial as you age or as you become more sedentary, which it leads to increased muscle, decreased muscle protein synthesis, increased muscle protein breakdown, and which is, if it's unaltered, especially as frailty, get increased amount of inflammation, it finally leads to loss of muscle mass and decreased physical function and frailty. And physical exercise can actually ameliorate a lot of those basic science mechanisms for that are active in causing muscle loss and frailty. So on a overall level, physical activity improves the ability to perform daily tasks. It helps prevent weak bones and muscle loss, improves joint mobility, improves sleep quality, reduces the risk of chronic conditions, extends years of activity and independent living, and reduces the likelihood of falling and risk of serious injury in case of a fall. And we know that everybody benefits from physical activity, so this is aimed at everybody, whether they're frail or not, because we know that it benefits everybody at the different stages of their life. It also benefits people in assisted care environments such as nursing homes, and also those at the extremes of age. And with increasing recognition that physical activity benefits people that are hospitalized, including those that are critically ill. And for maximum health benefit, and we'll hear a bit more about that after this, is a combination of endurance type of activity, strength, flexibility, and balance. So this is a slide that is aimed more at a lay audience or a citizen or patient audience, and looking at ways that we can encourage activity, and it looks at ways to promote resistance exercises, which be done twice a week, aerobic exercises 20 to 30 minutes a day, and things that challenge that improve balances, things like yoga, leg raises, and Tai Chi. And one of the important things about exercise, and I said it may help improve falls is a concern to a lot of people that are aging or that are older. It's certainly quite common in Canada, and if you look at people hospitalized for an injury, older people hospitalized for an injury, 81% of those hospitalized for an injury, it's secondary to falls, and falls and frailty are linked. If you fall especially recurrent falls can increase your risk of becoming frail, and if you're frail, you're at increased risk of falling. So it's bidirectional between falls and frailty, and certainly exercise can prevent that. And the things that so from a messaging point of view, from a reduction of falls, the things that can be done in the home environment on modification of living spaces, including installation of handrails and grab bars, to wear safe footing indoors, and activity, along with fall prevention programs if they exist in your area community, or fall prevention training. Now, if we look at the evidence for exercise, that's actually quite extensive, and there's really good evidence that exercise is able to prevent falls. So this is a systematic review from the Cochrane database, and it looked at 108 randomized control studies with 23,000 participants, And overall, the rate of falls by exercise was reduced by 23%. The exercise programs that were most beneficial at reducing falls were those involving balance and functional exercises. There are other ones that there was less certainty were things that involved multiple components, including balance, functional, and resistance exercises. Tai Chi could also prevent falls. But resistance exercises alone, there was a lot more uncertainty about that. And sleep is an important component of recovering from exercise. So as part of this, we're suggesting that there's better sleep hygiene, that people try, especially as you age, your sleep efficiency declines, that should aim for longer time, longer sleep hours, and also better habits to promote efficient sleep. So that's the A, or the activity component of avoid. Vaccination is the V, and vaccination is important because we know that as we age, our immune systems become weaker. You're much more likely to contract and communicable diseases, and they're much more likely to cause negative health effects. So if you're younger and you develop influenza, you may be in bed for 3 to 4 days, and you can go back to work and recover quite quickly. If you're 80 years old, have frailty, and develop influenza, it can cause catastrophic health deterioration, including hospitalization, prolonged bed rest, increased risk of cardiovascular events like developing a myocardial infarction, and even dying from it. And the 3 important vaccines for those that are aging are influenza, and there's 2 formulations of the influenza vaccine, the standard and the high dose, which the high dose has about 25% more efficiency than the standard one, and it's particularly more efficient in long-term care homes, but everybody should be vaccinated for influenza at all ages, but probably much more important as you grow older and have chronic health conditions which predispose you to a lot more adverse health effects from that. The shingles vaccine is another vaccine that everybody should have. Certainly developing shingles, post-herpetic neuralgia can cause severe health effects. There's 2 formulations of the shingles vaccine. There's the older one and the new Shingrix. The newer one is more effective. It's about 90% effective at reducing both shingles and the incidence of post-herpetic neuralgia. The older one is about 70% effective. It depends on where you are, which one is covered, or if any are covered. I understand in BC none, they're not covered. In Ontario, only the older one is covered, but it's an important vaccine. And the last one is pneumococcal vaccine, especially if you have chronic respiratory disease, and there's 2 formulations of that, but probably everybody over the age of 50 should get a pneumococcal vaccine. And also it's important to maintain the status of your other vaccinations, including tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. The importance about promoting vaccine as part of this strategy is that vaccination rates are quite low, and they're in the 50 to 60% range, depending on what population you survey. So it's important to increase those. The O in avoid is optimization of medications. We know that as Canadians age, especially as they get over the age of 65, the number of medications that they're on are more and more. So 2 to 3 Canadians over the age of 65 take at least 5 different classes of medications. And 1 out of 4 take at least 10 different classes of medications, and each class of medication you may have multiple doses of medications in each class. And as you increase the number of medications, you increase the risk of harmful effects, drug interactions, and the risk of hospitalization increases. The harmful effects, there's multiple potential harmful effects, including delirium, malnutrition for a variety of reasons. Anticholinergic medications may be associated with increased risk of falls. And it's important to, when we say optimization of medications, that there should be a periodic review of all the medications that you're on, especially as you're growing older, and particularly what you want to do is look at if there's any potential interactions between the medications. And also you want to make sure that the medications that you're on are appropriate for the life stage that you're at. Some medications may have been prescribed in the past and may no longer be needed. You may need newer medications for the life stage that you're at. So there's been a lot of talk about deprescribing. It's probably better to talk about optimization of medications such that you're on the right medications for the stage of life that you're currently at. The I stands for social interaction. So we know that loneliness and social isolation in older adults is deleterious. It's associated with frailty, with occurrence of functional decline, with malnutrition, with depression, with premature death. And about 40% of older adults experience loneliness. And it's important to be able to counteract that. And how you counteract that, this slide is definitely going to be changed as we go forward. But the counteracting social isolation and loneliness needs to be tailored to the individual, and it also needs to be tailored to the community support programs that there are. So yesterday we heard about community connectors and social prescribing. This would be one area that it could be used to counteract that. And there's multiple things that are available in communities. The other aspect of this is that as this becomes implemented, it's important to know what the resources are in individual communities, because a lot of times people are not aware of those resources. And finally, the last of avoid is diet and nutrition. And so diet and nutrition. So nutrition, the components consists of your intake, including eating and drinking, how you digest and how you absorb those nutrients. Malnutrition is absorbed when the diet quality is poor or not enough food is consumed. We know that about 1/3 of seniors have difficulty meeting their nutritional needs, and about 70% of malnourished patients live with frailty. So it's important. And there's quite good evidence that altering or maintenance of diet and nutrition, especially in combination with exercise, is able to maintain function and mitigate the progression of frailty, or if you're healthy, reduce the risk of developing frailty. And malnutrition is common in seniors for a variety of reasons. Our appetite tends to be reduced as we get older. Our sense of smell or taste may be altered. The numerous amount of medications that people are on may interfere with digestion and nutrition. Also, there's the social aspects that financial issues may limit how much money you have for food. Loneliness and grief may also impair your appetite, and also also illness and disease may impact your ability to eat. Dental health issues are also a problem in a lot of seniors, and good oral health is associated with healthy food choices and proper nutrition. And frailty is more common among people with poor dental status, so it's important to maintain dental status, and especially from an evaluation point of view, looking at the oral status is an important part of looking at people in care settings. So just a couple of last slides looking at the components of nutrition. The first one is protein. As you get older, you need more protein. There's lots of good sources of protein out there, including vegetarian options. And if you are unable to maintain enough protein, then supplements with high protein drinks, puddings, and shakes can certainly help. The amount of protein that you need as you get older, it's about 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if you weigh 80 kilograms, you should aim for about 120 grams of quality protein per day. And there's lots of sources to tell you how much protein is in each item. So, but that's the recommended range, 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. The other two very important aspects of diet and nutrition are adequate intake of calcium and vitamin D. Certainly, you can get enough calcium from a healthy diet, but if you have problems, then supplementation may be needed. Adults greater than 70 years old should have about 1,200 milligrams of calcium per day, and certainly there's lots of foods rich in calcium, and they're listed on that slide. I won't go through them in detail. The other aspect of calcium is vitamin D. Certainly we know that vitamin D is associated, or low levels of vitamin D is associated with increased risk of infectious diseases, associated with other diseases. And in Canada, because of lack of sunlight, we have a lot of trouble getting an adequate amount of vitamin D, and about 75% of Canadians have inadequate vitamin D intake, and supplementation is recommended over the age of 70, about 800 units a day, unless you have a diet that includes a lot of foods that are rich in vitamin D, including a diet that includes fish or fish oils or egg yolks. So that's the overall strategy. I mean, it's really nice that all the 5 elements fit under the acronym of AVOID. The messaging and the slides are going to be altered as we go forward, But so as we roll it out from CFN, what I would like to do is get your input on those questions. But before we go on, maybe I can have Robin Root go over some of the aspects of exercise from a physiotherapy aspect. Sorry,
That's okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Robin Roots. I'm a physiotherapist. I work here in the community. I'm also an instructor in the Department of Physical Therapy at UBC. Although I work at UNBC, I'm not on strike, so I can be here. And thank you for the opportunity, John, to come and speak. I think, certainly as John has indicated, there is, from a physiotherapy standpoint, we couldn't be more behind the push that we've heard this morning around physical activity and the need and the importance of physical activity in really healthy aging and in functional ability. And I think it was really great this morning to really tie together the importance of both that there are intrinsic factors around our physical health and being physically active in order to be able to be functional and to live really healthily and to live a long life. And I think we know that physical activity is important. We all know that. The hardest part is really being able to start it and engage in it and be able to sustain that over changes in our living situation in our life. And I think we hopefully will have an opportunity to really strategize about what are the ways in which we can engage people in physical activity. I think one important thing to think about, which I often get asked, is what do you consider physical activity, right? We throw that term around a lot, but what does it truly mean? Some people really go to that comment this morning that Isabel made around spandex and, being part of an aerobics class, but it doesn't have to look like that, right? We know that actually the benefits of physical activity and the great list that John provided about the changes that it can have in our metabolic and inflammatory processes actually just come from elevating our heart rate and elevating our respiration and our breathing, right? That's all it needs to take. And so that looks different for every individual. So physical activity for one person may be vacuuming their house and cleaning. It may be, as we saw in some of the beautiful vignettes this morning, around actually being involved in some kind of sporting activity or involved in line dancing. All of those things that get our heart rate up, allow us to breathe a little bit more heavily than normal, have those physiological benefits. So what's, I think, really critical when we start to think about strategies of how we unroll things like Avoid and what does physical activity look like, it needs to be personalized in a way. We can have all the resources in the world out there, and thankfully we're building those in northern communities, but it still comes down to individuals having the choice to do something that's meaningful to them. What does physical activity look like to that individual? And I don't know that we've done a good enough job to really help to enable people to identify what those choices are for them and then support them, enable them to actually carry that physical activity out. So I hope that when we start to strategize how we can bring Avoid to our communities, we can really think about that individual level piece, because I really fear sometimes we develop all these great programs and nobody comes. Why? How do we engage people in them? So I think that's a really critical piece. Another point kind of related to the physical activity piece that I just kind of wanted to mention, and it always sticks with me when I think about things like Avoid and many of the things that as a healthcare practitioner you're sort of trying to pay attention to all the time. And there's a wonderful saying that walking is actually the 6th vital sign, because we know so much about, the research shows that how fast you walk is actually an indicator of your health, and it's also a predictor of your mortality. We know that in order to live in the community, we need to walk about 1.2 to 1.8 meters per second. So walking across a room, how long does it take us to walk a certain distance, a number of meters? Very simple measurement, and we can tell from that speed whether you are able to cross the street, any street, whether it's got a stoplight or not. Are you able to do that in a safe manner? And we also have a really good idea of how likely you are to fall. So one of those kind of, again, pieces that we talked about around the interrelationship between frailty and falling. We know that if you are walking less than 1 meter per second, you're at a much greater risk of falling, and you're also at a higher risk of being hospitalized. If you're in hospital and you can't walk 1 meter per second, you're not likely to be discharged from hospital to your own home. So walking, even as a simple thing that we all do, when we think about it, and if we can do things to ensure that people can walk, give them the opportunity to walk, ensure that the built environment is suitable for them to walk, then we know that we're addressing many of those factors and a huge predictor of mortality overall. So that's something that I always try and think about too when I think about physical activity. Yes, it's all the sort of things we do, but it's also really our activities of daily living, and walking is such a critical piece of them. I look forward to our discussions and happy to kind of share from the physio perspective what some of the initiatives are that we've kind of developed in Northern BC and what that looks like, but I think we can wait for strategies unless there's anything else you want to add.
That's perfect. So thank you very much. So maybe what I can do is have maybe we can group ourselves into two tables. And at each table, we'll take the next 20 minutes to discuss those questions. And maybe we can appoint one person from each table as to report back to the group. And then at the end of the 20 minutes, I'm going to have the person that's reporting back to come back up here to the microphone. So let's organize ourselves into two tables, and we can take up those discussions. And these are questions that are suggested. If there's any other things that you think we should consider as we go forward with this, please let us know too. Okay, we'll break there, and so it's 10 to 12. So at 12:10, we'll report back.